From a young age, I've had a love of horror and the macabre, particularly horror anthology stories. I think the fact that I've covered Freddy's Nightmares and Trick or Treat is one of my favourite films of all time, let alone just for Halloween, really bears that out. The beauty of these things is, well, with a series, we don't have to worry about what happened last week. We don't have these, plot threads that we've got to keep track of. And, we can just drop in, we can miss a week and we haven't lost anything. We don't have to worry about spoilers. It's great. From a production side, it's also great. You don't have rising pay demands from the actors. You don't have to worry about these plot arcs yourself as you're plotting them out. It works all round. Now, with a film, because obviously it's meant to be a bit more entertaining and you are sort of stringing a few stories together, that overarching plot idea has to happen. That is actually a deal breaker for me. If you show me a horror anthology without a strong overarching plot, I'll forget most of it. I maybe remember one tale, which is why I do love Trick or Treat so much, because it weaves everything together so well. But this love came to me from, like I say, quite a young age, and I remember seeing the Tales from the Crypt TV series. From Danny Elfman's very, very signature music. It's got that whimsy, it's got that darkness. Perfect Elfman. Right through to the not too disturbing for young me puppet of the Crypt Keeper. And even like the tales, how they were told, how it was all staged. Everything came together brilliantly. And when you consider the minds behind it, the people who are driving this forward, it makes a lot of sense. These are people who know what they're doing. It wasn't just some people, like their first forays into this kind of thing, and it really worked well. Then, sort of in the sort of mid to late 90s, we had Tales from the Crypt Keeper, the animated show aimed at kids, which played up a bit more of the comedy and a bit less of the horror. It was mildly sanitized, but I don't think it was drastic. I think they still tried to keep as much horror as they could justifiably get past the censors. And if I recall correctly, they actually had a child psychologist who would watch them and make sure that nothing too severe got into the show. That's commitment and dedication. But these forays, into this world for me were very formative, I think, and it really did give me this love for horror and that style. And it surprised me at this age that I am now that I never actually experienced the original Tales from the Crypt. There were two films that kind of pulled from the original comics that I'd never come across until I was looking at it. Something came to me. I was like, oh, Tales from the Crypt. Haven't seen that for a while. And I looked into it, and yes, there was a film in 1972, and then there was a follow-up called Vault of Horror in 1973. Both released by Amicus, and both had decent casts. I think the stronger cast was definitely in the first one. But I was surprised I'd never heard of these. They just didn't get on my radar for so long, and I feel awful because I'd robbed myself of two fairly great anthology movies. They still hold up well today, considering these are like 40 plus years old now. Yes, technology factors are there. Yes, the blood is ridiculously bright red. Yes, there's some ridiculous fashion choices, but that was, appropriate for the time. But the storytelling, the sort of narrative overview, everything, more so again in the first one. The original 1972 Tales from the Crypt was the stronger of the two released by Amicus that were based on those tales, I will definitely say. Amicus were great for this. They did a lot of anthology horror films, and I may look at more of the back catalogue. But, like I say, Tales from the Crypt was really strong. Vault of Horror was okay. Because Tales from the Crypt had, such luminaries as Joan Collins, Sir Ralph Richardson. Really, I'm not going to say any more because you don't go anywhere after a Sir. That's normally your top flight there. But these are the kind of people that were involved. They were willing to do this. This is how well Amicus worked. Peter Cushing, was a massive mainstay of that type of film, and he of course chose the role that he had in Tales from the Crypt. He was like, I was going to read for this guy, but this guy is me. He'd recently had a very similar kind of situation in his own life, and he was basically playing himself to a degree, which is quite sad. But I think it got a great performance. So Awful as it may be, he suffered for his art, but the art didn't suffer. But it's so great, and of course the narrative thread that links it all. You know, we've got these people just seemingly going on a weird tour of some catacombs, who then stumble on this room where you know, no one's there. It's a dead end. They turn, then they look back, and Sir Ralph Richardson is sat there, all kind of in a monkly garb, just kind of, you know, guiding them through these stories. And in fact, the first one with Joan Collins actually was remade as, I think, the second episode of Tales from the Crypt. So we've seen different versions of this, and it was very hauntingly familiar for a moment. But, you know, all of these stories are great, you know, again, morality plays. The evildoer gets their comeuppance. And that's something that, you know, Bill Gaines really wanted to sell with these stories, and Al Feldstein. But, you know, these people wanted to give these morality plays. They wanted to make sure they weren't just doing horror for horror's sake. I could do a whole video about how, you know, the comics code and everything was basically because of them, sort of. And how technically Bill Gaines kind of screwed himself over. But, you know, there are a lot of these issues at play, but you know, they kept to their vision. They kept true to what they wanted to say. And, you know, I think the two films, like I say, the first one stronger than the second, although the second does have Tom Baker with a big bushy beard. That's never a bad thing, I'm sure. But they were great pieces. You know, they still hold up now. You know, there's so much to love about them. If you've never seen them, if you've only ever seen like the Tales from the Crypt TV series and maybe like the 3 films that were kind of under that umbrella, you know, in the 90s and the start of the 2000s, or maybe you've only seen like, you know, the Tales from the Crypt Keeper cartoon show and you want to see more, definitely hunt these out and give them a try. Like I say, even though they're over 40 years old, they hold up well. Ignore the fact that the blood's like a luminous orangey red. It was normal for the time and parodied beautifully in Sleepy Hollow. But definitely hunt these out. You know, give yourself some different entertainment. Enjoy it for what it is. And until next time, as always, thank you for watching and take care.